Welcome to YogiViews, where my guest is yoga itself, through interviewing those who practice it, teach it, sell it, or simply love it. I am Antonio Sausis. This is the second part of a two-part show where I'm interviewing George McLaird. One other of the branches of yoga is jnana yoga, and it attains to the realization of the oneness of the individual soul with the universal spirit through the path of devotion and love, as we were discussing. But also jnana yogis say, I am He, I am Brahman, I am the absolute truth. I am one with the supreme deity. By good works and concentration and contemplation and long fasting and prayer, Jesus realized that his soul was one with God's. Was he a jnana yogi?
In that term, he absolutely was. And what you just said really is the way of getting there. Prayer, meditation, contemplation, paying attention to our dreams, our daydreams, our night dreams, and listening to what we hear and see when we meditate. All of those things are part of the package that gets us from darkness into light.
Perhaps these were the practices that Jesus proposed.
Probably.
As a way of succeeding in spiritual life.
Yeah.
And one more of the common aspects with it. One of the very popular styles of yoga is Ashtanga yoga. And Ashtanga yoga that is so popular in the United States is related to Raja Yoga, which is the branch of yoga that describes the separation between the soul from the physical shell. And I was impressed when reading that while dying, when Jesus was being crucified, he said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. And this, in a way, indicates an amazing ability to, while in the midst of excruciating physical pain, yet being able to attain to a high level of spirituality and to access forgiveness. He was a Raja Yogi.
He had to be a master to do that. Most of us are not there yet. It's a wonderful goal, and I hope I live long enough to get there, but I'm not holding my breath. But he serves as a wonderful, wonderful example that it actually can be done. And we just need to practice our our disciplines, and day by day by day by day, we build up, and it becomes easier and easier.
Are there other signs in Jesus' words or work or teachings of this, we can say, dissociation between the soul and the body?
Well, I and the Father are one is kind of as close as we're ever going to get to that, I think. And, and I don't know if you have a hard time saying that or not. No. But years ago you may have. See, and where I was taught is you wouldn't say that for anything.
Absolutely.
Because it is such a, putting yourself as a chip off the old block is against the rules.
Yes.
You would never say anything like that except about Jesus.
Yes.
In my tradition, that's the only person
right.
you can say it.
Yes.
But then, if we start adopting that consciousness, and we start practicing those practices, after a while we see that we are one big, wonderful, wonderful unit. And we now have scientists and physicists who are telling us that in the physical world, that's the truth too.
That is the truth too.
You know, there's only one big mechanism here.
Yes.
And we're all a part of it.
And in fact, the issue you were bringing up is one that I have lived in my family. I happen to have an aunt who's very Christian and loves Jesus, and when we were discussing this issue about me saying, no, we're all a spark of God, we're part of God, we are God, she was saying, no! Precisely what you're saying. What do you think are the consequences in the mind of a practitioner of not feeling that oneness, of not being one, of not thinking that you are a drop of that ocean, a spark of that light?
Well, you would be, you could only teach beginners if you didn't believe that or didn't have an experience of it, because you would be at the entry level, and that's fine. We all need entry level teachers. But if one pays close attention to one's dreams and interprets them as best possible, or even gets help, if you pay attention to your daydreams and to your night dreams and to all things that you hear when you are meditating and all the things that you see when you're meditating and all the inspiration and the thoughts that come to your mind when you're meditating, eventually this flower grows. And it just becomes obvious after a while that we are connected with the great mystery.
The great mystery.
That's the word that I see. I came, of course, now from the very conservative fundamentalist Christian group. So it was God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Now I no longer use those terms on a regular basis. The great mystery is just so magnificent. The reason is that I don't have to pretend that I understand it, but I can still feel very, very emotionally close to it. And when I do a particular meditation where I feel closer to the great mystery than any other time of the day or night.
That is the closest you feel.
Yeah. And I'll just tell you what it is. So we use our imagination that a beam of light is coming from above and coming down into our brain, and it permeates every cell of our body. And it is repairing all that has gone wrong. It is bringing the immune system back up to working perfectly. It is getting rid of all disease, all dis-ease. And it is flushing out everything that is negative and filling us with a healing light. And I have that as a vision, and I can feel that happening. And it's just a great gift because I'm on the receiving end. I'm receiving a gift at that particular moment. Now, I do this meditation not only sitting down with my eyes closed, but I do it when I'm paying my grocery bill. Mm-hmm. You stand in line and there are people in front of you and they're having trouble with their credit card and other things. It used to be I sat there and complained internally, and now I do this meditation. And it just calms me down and hooks me up. Now, the other thing it's doing is, I believe it's doing, it is also, what it is doing for my body, it is also doing for my mind and for my spirit. So it is a remarkably refreshing exercise to do. And if you do it long enough, which I've been doing it now for a long time, I can actually feel that coming in and putting myself in a receiving mode, which is very humbling. And I think to be a good yogi, you have to be very humble and realize that we need all the help we can get.
Yes. And certainly to probably be closer to these type of experiences rather than the intellectual understanding of them, which is what you were saying about your experience with the great mystery.
And one of the things that I have been taught in yoga and spirituality is to ask the question, what is the healthiest thing I can do for myself today? And different days that's different. And one of the healthiest things we can do is eat less and drink less. It's pretty basic right there, because we do have a tendency this to be the worst eating time of the year. And it's wonderful to celebrate, but it is much better to end the holiday season being healthy.
In yoga, we know that certain practices or deep practices can lead to what's called siddhis or powers, and clairvoyance or levitation or walking on nails are some of the very popular siddhis that everybody knows. Now, we know that like Krishna or Buddha, Jesus healed the sick, opened the eyes of the blind, made the lame walk, and read the secret thoughts of his disciples. He knew what Judas was going to do when Peter was going to deny him. Were these Jesus' CDs?
Well, they obviously were. But again, the tradition does not teach that, and they certainly don't use those words. They couch it in terms that he was God living on earth, and therefore these were natural divine traits that anybody who is divine has. But when we look at it through the eyes of the yoga tradition, we see that there are parallels there, and that they're really wonderful. Now, years ago, in emulation of Jesus, I went to a retreat center and spent 40 days in silence. And there are two things that came out of that for me. One is I found out that I'm a very, very, very happy person. And I am happy about being here. I mean, being here on earth, being able to breathe and look and see and smell and touch and all that, it's a great privilege to be here. I mean, it's not just an accident of existence. It is a great privilege to be here. And sometimes I look at my hands and just marvel at the fact that I'm here. And so that's one thing I got out of it, is how delighted I am. The other thing is my intuition is far better than it's ever been. I have intuitional hits, and sometimes I miss them. You know, I get them and I'm not going to do that. And then 20 minutes later, I should have done that. But that's one of the things that happens. And you know, I'm not a great meditator like some of these people in the East. You know, the Tibetan Buddhists and those people. They are really heavy duty. So I can understand that if you do meditation at my level, and it improves your intuition. If you did it even more, you'd know an awful lot about a lot of things.
One of the reasons why this is said to happen is because everything we need to know how to live in this existence, we already know, we already have. This is why yoga says, if you really want to know, go within, because that's where the answers are. This is one of the core principles of yoga. And Jesus said, when you know yourselves, then you will be known. And you will understand that you're children of the living Father. But if you do not know yourselves, then you live in poverty, and you are the poverty. Was he referring to this principle?
He was. Absolutely. And it can be called by any name you want to, but it's the same principle. And I think one of the things that yoga does for us, on the physical level, it gives us flexibility, it gives us strength, and it gives us balance. At least that's the main things that I've gotten from it. But then when you go into and have a yoga of the mind and a yoga of the spirit, then you're really combining what the whole practice is all about. And
absolutely.
And you know, if you plant a seed and you water it and it's in good sunlight, it is going to grow. And we have the very same thing that we have to do. We need to continue with our practice, continue with our discipline, and we need to ask ourselves every day, what is the healthiest thing I can do for myself today? And when we do, all of that we saw so magnificently in Jesus begins to come about. And it isn't that we know about it and we pretend that it's there until we get good at pretending. It's a natural flow. So we have in the New Testament, the fruit of the Spirit, love and joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and the last one, which I love, is self-discipline or self-control. And these are not things that you can just conjure up. These are things that you have to stay with the practice, and then they kind of conjure themselves up because they just grow naturally. And on the other way, I heard somebody say one time, if you hang around with a skunk, eventually you're going to smell like a skunk.
Yes.
And if you hang around with the Spirit, eventually you're going to smell like the Spirit.
Like the Spirit. And this brings me to the next question, which is that yoga says, so below as above, or it is in the macrocosm as it is in the microcosm. And when I read words attributed, of course, to Jesus, and he was saying, if your leaders say to you, look, the Father's kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, it's in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is within you and it is outside of you. I hear an expression of that same thing. Do you agree?
Yeah. And, because of the way I was raised, I never believed that. I was always looking for somebody on the outside to tell me what was the best thing for me to do. I was looking for a teacher or a parental figure or a coach or anybody because I didn't know that I could go within and ask those questions. And once I learned that from Yogananda and the Self-Realization Fellowship, and from practicing and practicing and practicing and reading, eventually I did go in and seek some answers. And one day I was meditating, and I say minding my own business, and a Christ figure showed up in my mind's eye, and there were several people standing behind him, and he handed me a big silver serving tray, and it was empty. And so with my imaginary hands, my meditation imaginary hands, I reached out and took it, and I said, what am I to do with this? And he said, put food on it and feed people. And I said, I knew that had to do with my talks, with my sermons, and with my classes, right? So I knew that. And I said, well, I have nothing important to say. And the guys behind him laughed out loud, and that was the end of the meditation. And I couldn't figure it out. It made no sense to me, and I shared it with everybody that was willing to listen. And finally, one day I was really annoyed, and I sat down to meditate while I was still annoyed. And so I closed my eyes, I take my breath, I get myself settled, and I said, I want to know what that serving tray is all about. It was like I demanded an answer. And I heard in my mind's eye, whatever nourishes you, just pass it on. It changed the way I did sermons. It changed the way I did classes. It changed everything about the ministry that I was doing. It went from me preparing intellectually, scholarly, in a particular way, being very, very, doing paragraphs with footnotes, now to real everyday life where I was living in what was nourishing me. And I found out that the things that nourished me nourished other people as well. And it was a big revelation. Now that's going within and finding the answer for yourself. In this particular case, it was through a meditation.
And your creation, the class or the program you've created, Spiritual Living. Tell us about it. Did it happen as an intuition? How did it come to life?
Well, it came to life because of my theological discomfort, which had in 1972. And so I started making a list of things that people do who are really successful in their spiritual lives, where they become healthy and they become happy and they become productive. And so I just taught that for many years. Then in 2001, I retired from the Parish ministry, and I was not involved in any ministry for a couple of years. And then I got involved in teaching spiritual living at residential drug and alcohol treatment programs. So then I took all the lists that I had and eventually put them into the book that I have published recently. And that's what I teach. And what I teach is that you know what nourishes you better than I do, or any other minister or priest or rabbi or anything. You know. And So I'm just a conduit to get you to look at all of that and to make a list of what works for you. And we're all different. So that if 10,000 people get on a spiritual path, there are 10,000 spiritual paths, all perfectly and wonderfully suited for each individual.
Now, you've just named that one of the main places where you apply your program, your class, is in recovery facilities.
Yeah.
As part of the 12-step programs that we are most used to, one of the very essential aspects is that you can't do it yourself. You don't know how to do it. This is why you need to relinquish all your faith to God and let Him do it for you.
Yep.
This is very different because you were just placing the power of the knowledge in the individual.
Yeah.
How do you work with this?
Well, it goes back to whether you see God as out there who is going to fix you, or if you are going to get in touch with the divine that is within yourself and fix yourself from the inside out. Now, many of the people that I deal with have never heard of the spiritual life, literally. I mean, one man told me that, and after class I challenged him, and I said, "What do you mean? How could you not hear about it?" And he said, "Well, you know, my grandparents and parents are heroin dealers, and we all been using heroin. We never talk about God or anything." And here was a person who is a virgin to all of this stuff. And so we started, we do meditation. Every class I do, I have meditation as involved in it. And it's just a way of beginning to access what is in there for each of us. And where is the cure? So I teach that each of us has an internal genius that knows how to stay clean and sober, and that we are blocked from that internal genius, and we need to open that door. And so I have a meditation where I help them get there.
That would be the theme of another show,
Yeah, okay.
if you don't mind. Some say that addicts are spiritual seekers, much like the monks that go to a monastery for 8 or 10 years, only that seeking in the wrong place.
Yes.
Would you agree with this?
Oh, absolutely. You bet. And I in my book I actually mentioned that. I mentioned that and I referred to it earlier, that we're all on a spiritual journey, and but some of us have gotten off into some very, very bad territory. And people who are using heroin, cocaine, methamphetamine, and all that, they're on a very, very darkened spiritual path, and somebody needs to turn on the light. And that's what all these therapy groups are about. That's what the 12 steps is all about. And there are a lot of other programs that don't use the 12 steps that are very, very effective. And that's the reason I don't stick with just one thing. I say, try what works for you, because that really is what works.
And you've mentioned your book. How did the idea of a book came around?
I had taught this material in classes where I just made a list of a few things, that people could try. And then when I started working at the recovery programs, then I made them into booklets, so that each client would get a booklet, and take it home and use it as a workbook. And finally, about probably 2 years ago, I decided that I was going to take the entire collection and put it together, and there it is, a guide for spiritual living. And it's hundreds of suggestions on things to do to get on the spiritual path for our body, our mind, and our spirit. And in one of the worksheets, it says, what are you going to stop doing to your body? That's one question. For instance, if you're a drug addict, you're going to stop doing that. But there are people who eat a lot of sugar, or a lot of red meat, or put a lot of things in their body, junk food and candies and all kinds of things, or smoking, which is a horrible habit. And so that's what you list, the things I'm going to stop doing. And then what are the things you're going to start doing for your body? Well, yoga is on the top of the list.
Mm-hmm. Yes, of course.
For us.
Yes.
My wife and I, we become gym rats because we do yoga, we do Pilates, and about 6 or 8 months ago, we added Zumba. And we were doing Zumba this morning, and it's fun.
You enjoyed it?
Oh yeah, it's loud music, and there are about 40 of us in the class, and we're just laughing and having a good time, just trying to do the steps right and swing with the music. The next one is, what are you going to do for your mind? That's what you're going to stop doing with your mind. Well, obsessing, for example, or having attack thoughts against other people. There are a lot of things that we can stop doing with our mind. What are we going to start doing with our mind? And the bottom line is, anything that's new is good for the brain. We know that. Mm-hmm. And so new language, Zumba's on that list too for me. And it's just learning an instrument, going a new place, are all the things that we can do for our mind. Start reading good material and watching good television. And then what are you going to stop doing to your spirit? Well, drugs are downers if you use them long enough. Alcohol is a downer, as we all know. And one thing I do for my spirit is I listen to music. I have a playlist of about 125 songs, and I play it in the car. And every time I say to myself, George, you're really being good to yourself. And these are songs that are emotional to me. And so one song will make me laugh, and I'll sing along, and I'll tap my foot. And the next song will touch me emotionally, and I'll have tears in my eyes. And those are my sacred songs. Mm-hmm. And so if you made a list, and I made a list, and 10,000 people made a list, the list would be different, because there's so much music, and it is such a wide variety. But we would each have our own particular list. So it is that tailoring of the spiritual path that really is what I'm doing these days.
George, if you were to mention one principle that Christianity and yoga have in common, that in your experience, either for you personally or for the individuals you work with, you think is the most important, which one principle?
Okay, well, I have actually written about this. So I have answered the question, and the golden rule is on top. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you.
George, if people want to get in touch with you, how should they do so?
Probably the easiest way is to go on my website, and all my
which is?
It is McLaird.com, McLaird.com.
All right. Well, I appreciate very much you having come to our show today. I thank you. And,
you're welcome. I appreciate you having me.
It was a long wish of mine since I was a young student of yoga, and I had the opportunity to study with some Christian monks that referred to the similarities and the common places, and I was so interested. So for me, this is a personal treat. Thank you very much. And I hope to have you again on the show.
Thank you very much.
George McLaird has been in the ministry since 1968 and served 4 Presbyterian churches. Prior to retiring from Parish ministry in 2001, he served the Sausalito Presbyterian Church as pastor for 26 years, and currently he's the Pastor Emeritus there. For almost a decade now, he's been teaching spiritual living, a class, a program that he teaches at 4 different residential recovery programs. And his class is not about religion, but rather about spiritual living, which is being as healthy as possible every day in every way. While religion is prepackaged with approved rituals, readings, songs, and worship styles, spiritual living encourages people to choose what they find nourishing for their body, their mind, and their spirit now. In his new book, a guide for spiritual living. He gives several hundred suggestions for nourishing oneself spiritually, mentally, and physically. I hope you like our show today. And if you care to let me know, shoot me an email at antonio@yogiviews.com. I hope to see you the next time.